Archaeologists, on the other hand, conclude that the Olmecs who sculpted these monoliths have been shown to be absolute masters of realistic portraiture and did not arrive at the distinct Negroid features by accident. It is also noted that there could not possibly be a coincidence of stylization of a distinct people with facial features and characteristics which separates them from the features and characteristics of all other races on this planet. There can be no room for geographical coincidence that the very period that the Negroid appeared in Mexico, that was the same period when the first pyramid, mummies, and hieroglyphics began to appear in Mesoamerica as well. Is it a coincidence that the Teotihuacan head of pre-Columbian Mexico greatly resembles early Mandingo clay heads and Nigerian images? Many of the historians today have confirmed to the speculation of the Olmec monolith heads. They cannot explain the representation of the Negroid, despite the coloration, the fullness of the lips, prognathism, tattoos, tribal markings and tribal scarification, kinky hair, the broad nose, and the Egyptian-style military accessories. Historians now speculate that the sculptures were not constructed by Negroid people, but perhaps by Asians. If this had indeed been the case, why would people erect such huge monuments of Negroid representation? Why would Asians build colossal monuments to portray the Negroid of Africa when they had their own gods and legendary heroes? So realistic are these representations of the Negroid that it is extremely difficult to suggest that these figures were constructed by anyone other than Negroids themselves. Were the Asians attempting to construct an Egyptian metropolis by erecting Negroid stone heads, pyramids, clay pottery, which is identical to the Egyptian and even the Nigerian art? How could the Asians arrive at the startling similarities between the Olmec civilization and the Egyptian civilization? Even more absurd than these claims is how the Asians built these monolith heads. It is interesting to note the similarities between the mysteries of the construction of the Olmec heads and the pyramids of Egypt, both Negroid civilizations. The historical professors' hypotheses are in fact denials of an ancient Negroid civilization in America, which predates all other ancient civilizations and cultures in America. No one has denied that the Olmec civilization is perhaps the oldest of America that stretches back into antiquity, nor is there any legitimate denial that the Olmec monoliths represent Negroid people. However, there is denial that the true indigenous people of America were Negroid. Research shows that the Olmecs did not mysteriously vanish as suggested by historians, but that the Olmecs migrated far north and mixed in with the 4th century Chinese missionaries under Buddhist monk Hu Shen, who traveled to what is now California and produced what Columbus mistakenly called Indian and the British called the Red Man. Other Olmecs migrated to Southeast America and established settlements, Research suggests that Olmecs mixed in with Negroid traders from Morocco, the Moors, thus becoming known as Washoe, and established governments and sovereign nations thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans. These claims have thus been repudiated by historical circles who have gone beyond the call of duty to counteract the suggestion that the original Native American, in every sense of the word, were African, Negroid, Black, Egyptian, or Nubian people, and not red men living in huts and teepees. So, who were the Olmecs? Where did they come from and why? Why does the Olmec culture parallel Egyptian culture? Who are the black gods carved in the stone found in Mexico? Did the Olmecs simply vanish, or do they still exist today under various names like African American, Negro, Black, Mexican, Puerto Rican? Is there a cover-up governed by archaeological and historical circles to hide the present identity of Olmecs in order to protect the land that would otherwise technically and literally be owned by these indigenous people? We owe it to ourselves to unearth the largest find to date. This find is that of the very first Americans. Where did the Olmecs come from? The Olmecs came from Nubwa in Central Africa, and they migrated to America, in which they named in their Kushite language Utala, which means vacate. When the Olmecs discovered that there was actually a North Utala and South Utala, the word Utala became plural, which became Atlan, which is where the word Atlantis and Atlanta came from. The Olmecs were a tribe in Africa called Dogon in Mali. When the Dogons migrated to America, they also imported the rubber tree, which is only indigenous to Africa. The Dogons used the sap from the rubber tree to make shoes, coats, capes, and they were the first to introduce soles on shoes in the New World. The name Olmec means rubber people. The rubber was also used to make large balls for the Olmecan ball game ceremonies, which was played in large stone arenas. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the West, he states that he saw natives kicking around a large ball that was made of some type of acacia. Columbus took some of these trees and balls back to Spain with him, and today, soccer is the favorite national sport of Spain. These Olmecs set up empires and cities that predates even the Inca, the Aztecs, and the Mayans. The Olmecs were not Siberians. The Olmecs were dark-skinned, big-lipped, wide-nosed Africans, just as they are portrayed in the stone monoliths. The step pyramids of Egyptians closely resembles the step pyramids found in the Americas. The double crown of Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt with the bird and the serpent is also found in Olmecan culture, with Upper and Lower Egypt being Northern and Southern America. The Mexicans have 4 calendars. The 4th calendar is identical to the Egyptian calendar. In Mexico, there was found a type of paper made from a specific type of wood pulp that scientists say can only be found in Egypt. Even the ceremonial dance of the Hopi Indians is identical to the Dogon's Bado dance of Africa, using the same symbols and spirit names. Various tribes such as the Osage and the Apache use the crescent moon symbol, which is the national symbol of Angola, Mauritania, Tanzania, the Sahara, and Algeria, all found on the continent of Africa. Previously, I mentioned that the Olmecs and the Chinese combined to produce the Red Indian, and I will delve deeper into that right now. In the 4th century, a Chinese missionary under the Shang dynasty named Ho Xian, or Hu Xian, came to America in search of his people, who were the East Yi, meaning the Black Chinese. When the Chinese arrived, they encountered the Olmecs, who had already been living on the land. The Chinese considered the black Olmecs as the descendants of the black Chinese, Yi people. Hu Shen's people settled and mixed in with the Olmecs and produced the Aboriginal. The Olmecs gave the lower kingdom to the Aborigines. The Aborigines called the land Mujian, which is a combination of the Olmecan Ashuric Aramaic word Mu, which means one, and the Chinese word Zhan, named after Hu Shan. Did you know that there was a province in China today called Zhan, and that this is the site of one of the only Chinese pyramids? Mujian became Mijian and eventually became Mekjian, or Mexico. The Aborigines called themselves Mexicans, and they remixed with the Olmecs, which resulted in a sub-tribe called the Hopi. The Hopi clan was taught the religion of the Dogon and given the secret of the stars. Several hundred years later, the Hindu East Indians arrived in Mexico, and they bred with the Mexicans and produced Mongoloid tribe types like the Inuit and Eskimo, who migrated far north into Canada and Alaska. Out of the Mexican also came the Aztec, Inca, Toltec, Mixtec, and the Mayans, which were the 5 barbarian nations. The Mayans rejected their Olmec ancestry and gravitated towards their Chinese ancestry. The Mayans began practicing human sacrifices and cannibalism. The Mayans were banished by the original Olmecs and were told to leave or be destroyed. The Mayan relocated and sailed east to Asia and mixed in with the Mongols of Southeast Asia and became known as Angkor. Today, the Angkors no longer go by that ancient name. Their modern-day name is Cambodian. Yes, the Cambodians are really the Native Americans that were banished. This is why the ruins in ancient Cambodia are identical to the ruins of the Mayan Empire. History claims that the Mayan civilization just vanished. The word Mayan means illusions because it seems as if they disappeared overnight. The Mayans didn't just disappear. An entire ethnic group just simply vanished overnight. They simply packed up and moved to the other side of the planet. And you might be wondering, am I saying that the Red Indian is an Aborigine? Well, the Red Indian is a result of mixing between Olmecs and Chinese. This is why you have some Native Americans with dark skin and Negroid features, and some with light skin and Mongoloid features. Olmecs were indigenous Americans. Chinese were immigrants. Mexicans are Aborigines, who were the combination of Olmecs and Chinese. The East Indians that came here were also immigrants. The East Indians that came here were also immigrants. The East Indians that came here were also immigrants. As for the tribes of North America, the tribes of North America were a result of Olmec and Mexicans. However, some of the Mexicans continued to mix with the Chinese and produced yellow tribes like Pueblo and Manso or Mansu. The yellow tribes mixed in with each other and produced tribes like the Chinook, Tutuni, Kalupaya, Chumash, Oinut, and others. Tribes broke off from each other and produced even more tribes that settled in California. The darker-skinned tribes were the tribes that managed to contain much of the Olmec blood, like the Arapaho, Arikara, the Blackfoot, Cheyenne, Crow, Apache, Mandan, the Pawnee, and the Shoshone. In the 15th century, all of this changed. The Europeans arrived for the first time, the Spaniards, French, British, Italians, and Portuguese. The Europeans mixed in with all of the tribes, black, red, and yellow, and they produced even more stocks. Today you will find white Native American tribes. The tribes that did not wish to mix with the Europeans were destroyed. The Incans were destroyed by the Spanish, who stole their culture and are now calling themselves Hispanic. The Incans were destroyed by the Spanish, who stole their culture and are now calling themselves Hispanic. The Incans were destroyed by the Spanish, who stole their culture and are now calling themselves Hispanic, which is a term that was popularized and some say even coined by Ronald Reagan. As far as the darker tribes or the black tribes, the Olmecs migrated into two directions. One group of the Olmecs migrated into the eastern islands near the Bermuda Triangle and settled in the islands of Jamaica, Haiti, the Bahamas, Trinidad, and Barbados. The Olmecs set up colonies on these islands and became known as the Arawaks. These were the people Christopher Columbus encountered. The Spanish and the British mixed in with the Arawaks. The Olmecs of Haiti went back to their African roots and began practicing their religion called Yoruba, which is mistakenly called Voodoo. The Arawaks mixed in with the Portuguese and produced a tribe of half Negroid, half Latin called Taino. The Taino were invaded by another tribe called the Caribs, who were sadistic cannibalists. The Caribs migrated to an island known as the Caribbean. The other group of Olmecs traveled north and settled in Southeast America and became known as the Washoe, which means raccoon people. These people settled into areas of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Georgia. The Washoe mixed with the Malian Moors of Africa who also came over. The result of this mixing was a tribe of pure-blooded black Native Americans called Yamasee or Yamasee. The Yamasee resided in Georgia and were the mother tribe of all dark southeastern and eastern tribes. Yamasee is a direct descendant of the Olmecs through the Washita Moors. The Washita is a derivative of the term Wichita, who are known as Kitkitish, which means raccoon eyes, which refer to the black Native Americans because of their faces. Thus the term coons was used to identify a black person. The Yamasee lived in Georgia on the Ocmulgee River near Macon, Georgia, and where the early Yamasee mounds were discovered. Today, Macon is also the home of the Harriet Tubman African American Museum. The Yamasee is the mother tribe of the Creeks, the Seminoles, the Apaches, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Catawbas, and the Cherokee. In the 1700s, the British, French, and Spaniards mixed into these tribes. In 1715, the Yamasee rose in rebellion against the English and allied with the Spaniards. Some of the Yamasee Creeks migrated to what is known as Savannah, Georgia, and became outlaws under the tribal name Yamacraw. The British began taking women and children into slavery. Now, you may be wondering, hey, he just kind of skimmed over that little part about the blacks mating with the Chinese to produce the Red Indian. Well, I'm going to attack that right now. You may be wondering, were there even blacks in China? And the answer to that is yes. There were indeed blacks in ancient China. The skeletal remains from southern China are predominantly Negroid. The people practice single burials, which is an African ritual. In northern China, the blacks founded many civilizations. The three major empires of China was the Jia dynasty, the Shang Yin dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty was the first dynasty founded by the Mongoloid people in China, called the Hua. The founders of the Jia and the Shang came from the fertile African crescent by way of Iran. Chinese civilization began along the Yellow River. Here the soil was fertile, and black Chinese farmers grew millet 4,000 years ago, and later soybeans. They also raised pig and cattle. By 3500 BC, the blacks in China were raising silkworms and making silk. The cultural hero Huang Di is a direct link of Africa. His name is pronounced in Old Chinese as Yuhai Handi, or Hu Nak Kunte. He was supposed to have arrived in China from the west in 2282 BC and settled along the banks of the Low River in Shaanxi. This literal translation of Huan Yi to Hu Nak Kunte is interesting because Kunte is a common clan name among the Manding speakers. The Africans or blacks that founded the civilization in China were often called Li Min, meaning black-headed people, by the Zhao dynasty. This term has affinity to the Sumero-Akudan term Sa-ge-ga, black-headed people. These Li Men are associated with the Chinese cultural hero Yao. We know very little about the sounds of the ancient Chinese because ancient Chinese was very different from Old Chinese and Middle Chinese and the modern Chinese dialects. This results from the fact that the Chinese dynasties were founded by a diverse ethnic group. Jia and Shang Li, i.e. Black Shang, were founded by Dravidian and Manding speakers. Shang Yin was founded by classic Mongoloids, and the Zhao by contemporary Chinese. This explains the difference in pronunciation for ancient Chinese spoken by the Jia and Shang peoples and Old and Middle Chinese, or a variant thereof which is spoken by the Zhao people. The Shang characters compare favorably to the ancient Proto-Saharan script used by the Harappans in the Indus Valley, and the Manding script used in the ancient Sahara and Crete. Clyde Winters outlined the spread of the Proto-Saharan script to Harappa and throughout the Sahara African and Asian by the Dravidians and the Manding. Evidence of Chinese writing first appears around 2000 BC as pottery markings. The shell and bone characters represented writing. They were not pictures but wedges similar to African cuneiform. The Shang symbols compare favorably with ancient Manding symbols as well. Although there are different contemporary pronunciations for these symbols, they have the same meaning and shape. This suggests the genetic relationship between these scripts because we know that the present pronunciation of the Chinese symbol probably has little relationship to the ancient pronunciation of Chinese spoken in the Jia and Shang times when these characters were first used. This cognation of script supports the proposed Dravidian and Manding migration and settlement of China during the Jia times. The identification of the first hero of China, Hu Nak Kunte, as a member of the Kunte clan of the Manding speakers of Africa is supported by the close relationship between the Manding languages and the Chinese. Even though we do not know the ancient pronunciation of many Chinese signs, many Chinese and Manding words share analogy and suggest a Manding substratum for Chinese. I mentioned Black Shang, so I will further explain. There were two Shang empires. The first Shang dynasty was Shang Li, meaning Black Shang. It was ruled by Li Shang, or Black Shang. For the last 273 years of the Shang Empire, the capital was situated at Anyang. The Shang Empire based at Anyang was founded by the Yin nationality. We call this empire Shang Yin. Thus we have Shang Li Empire and the Shang Yin Empire. The Yin were classical Mongoloid people related to the Tai and other small Mongoloid Austronesian speaking people situated in Southeast Asia. The use of the blackbird as the father of Zhai relates to the blackbird as a popular totem of black ethnic groups in China. This indicates that the founders of Shang were of mixed origin. The bird myth I just mentioned, which is centered on the east coast of China, suggests black origin for Shang, since this area was the heartland of ancient China. Both the ancient Chinese and Africans had similar naming practices. As in Africa, the Shang child had both a day name and a regular name. The Shang child was named according to the days of the sun on which he was born. They were 10 days in each sun. These days are called the 10 celestial signs. In the mulberry tree tradition, one day 10 suns rose from a mulberry, and the archer Yi shot them down. He actually only shot 9 down. The suns in reality were birds. The bird myth refers to the blackbirds that founded the Shang dynasty. The fact that only one of the 10 birds survived the arrows of the archer of Yi may be related to the unification of the 10 clans of the Shang dynasty. The reference to blackbirds in the Chinese literature relate to the African origin of the Shang rulers. The use of the term blackbird relates to the fact that these blacks had a bird as their totem. There is a similar account in Native American history, where the blackbird rescues the red bird from the white bird, which retreats back into the caves. This analogy is a reference to the Negroid releasing the red Indian from the clutches of the European colonialism. We know that birds do not live in caves. The cave is a reference to the mountains of Europe, the Caucasus Mountains. And as far as blacks in Asia today, many Africans and Chinese mixed and moved far north into Tibet, where they become known as nomads and live a very similar life to the Africans in Kenya. The Dravidian speakers originally came from Nubia. They were related to the Sea group people. The Shang culture was founded by the Kushites, thus the name Yi, meaning great bowman, thus corresponding to Stu, the name for the founders of the Tat Seti, the first monarchy in history. The Yi seem to have lived in both North and South China. Fu Sut Nin in Yi His Tunga Shao makes it clear that the Shang culture bearer remained allied to the rest of the Yi people who lived in southern China. The founders of Jia are usually referred to as Yue, as opposed to Yi. It would appear that most of Yi were Dravidian speakers, while Yue were Manding speakers. The first Shang king of Zhuan Wang, meaning black king. Zhuan means black. He was called Zhuan Di, meaning black emperor. The founder of the Shang dynasty was called Zhuan Nao, meaning black bird. Another Shang king was called Zhuan Mu, meaning black oxen. And the list goes on and on and on